German officers in 1943 dismissed Allied rumors of strange new bombs as idle fantasy, believing their engineering invulnerable. But on the moonless night of May 16, Operation Chastise would transform confidence into catastrophe. 19 Lancasters of No. 617 Squadron RAF, armed with Barnes-Wallis's secret bouncing bombs, skirted treetops and eluded anti-aircraft fire to smash through the mighty Möhne and Edersee dams. Within hours, the Ruhr Valley, Germany's industrial heart lay devastated beneath surging floodwaters, shattering myths of invulnerability in concrete and steel. At 21:30 hours on May 16, 1943, Wing Commander Guy Gibson marshaled 133 airmen and 19 specially modified Avro Lancaster III bombers at RAF Scampton. Their mission, Operation Chastise, aimed to breach Germany's vaunted Möhne, Edersee, and Sorp dams, protected by steel torpedo nets and bristling with 20 and 37 flak guns commanded by Oberstleutnant Rudolf Fassbender. German calculations, based on past raids, estimated their 131-foot Möhne and 157-foot Edersee dams could absorb weeks of heavy bombing. But British intelligence, aware of every detail of the defenses, had prepared the 9,000-pound upkeep, bomb cylindrical, back-spinning, and meant to skip over nets to strike the dam wall. The Lancasters, crewed by men like Group Captain John Whitworth and Navigation Officer Flight Lieutenant David Shannon, would attack in 3 waves under radio silence. Environmental conditions: a moonless night, cold mist over the reservoirs, blackout on the ground complicated navigation and aiming, but provided the cover needed. Unknown to the defenders, a radical new weapon approached, primed to upend German assumptions with a single, perfectly timed strike. At 21:59, the first 9 Lancasters crossed the Dutch coast at just 100 feet, flying through flak and darkness. The Möhne Dam's defenders, including Oberleutnant Heinrich Scholz and his flak crews, swept searchlights and opened up with quadruple 20 batteries, but the bombers pressed on, hugging the water to avoid radar. At 00:28, Wing Commander Gibson led the first attack run, releasing the upkeep bomb at 60 feet and 240 mph. The spinning cylinder skipped over nets and detonated against the dam's upstream side. Torrents of water ripped through a 230-foot breach. Within minutes, reports from German radiomen like Unteroffizier Karl Dreher described lights failing and villages inundated as the Edersee Dam was struck next. British Y service at RAF Medmenham intercepted panic signals as Fassbender called for reinforcements and the hydroelectric grid faltered. Despite 18 mph crosswinds and thick mist causing bombsight error, further aircraft made their runs, suffering losses but breaking the dams. By 01:51, over 330 million tons of water rushed through the valleys, and the night's mission transformed from daring gamble to historic devastation. The drama was far from over, as German recovery forces now faced unprecedented industrial chaos. At 02:05 hours, Lieutenant Hans-Peter Vogel of the Wehrmacht's 9th Flak Division, stationed at the southern approach to Neheim, radioed Schutzstaffel Command with an urgent message. All communications along the Ruhr Valley's northern telegraph network had failed simultaneously. Using the KL-35 field switchboard, Vogel confirmed with 4 separate municipal stations, Wickede, Ferndenberg, Ense, and Herdringen, that their telephony indicators registered 0 line voltage. Maintenance crews at Herdringen noted the cable junction was submerged under more than 17 meters of water. Measuring conductivity losses beyond 210 ohms, the standard limit for operational circuits. By 02:12, every switchboard operator in Neheim had logged repeated failed connection attempts. Technically, this discovery revealed a catastrophic infrastructure collapse. The normal expectation was for individual outages due to localized strafing, usually limited to a single line or 2, perhaps a junction box rendered inoperable by debris. Instead, Vogel's figures showed a total loss across a 12-kilometer grid, where even redundant trunk lines from Soest were out. He immediately relayed this to Oberst Franz Kessler at regional headquarters via encrypted field phone, using the fallback T63 direct line, and received confirmation from engineering sections at Wicked within 7 minutes, initiating the highest priority recovery protocol. On the Allied side, Group Captain John Whitworth in the operations room at RAF Scampton received coded reports from Y-Service signals units confirming intercepted German panic transmissions by 02:15. The loss of telegraph communications across 16 kilometers of the Ruhr meant British bomb assessment teams could now divert aerial reconnaissance priority to Brecon and Arnsberg rail bridges, previously considered too risky. At 02:23, new orders coordinated 5 PRU, photographic reconnaissance unit, sorties to exploit this communication blackout, and combined mosquito intruder missions redirected toward Houston for interdiction of rail and road movement before sunrise. For the German defenders, Obersignalmeister Gustav Henk of Heeresnachrichten Regiment 467 at Möhne and Edersee was initially perplexed by communication failures. Within 10 minutes, his technicians deployed MTK-61 line testers and attempted to patch circuits with makeshift bypasses, reporting severe insulation failures in submerged lines. Henk's unit struggled with incomplete reports field radios, generated massive static due to local electrical faults, and command traffic rapidly devolved into confusion. Higher-level coordination with the 6th Panzer Army collapsed entirely as both telephone and radio relay chains disintegrated. Between 02:10 and 02:22, these technical failures propagated across at least 7 additional command posts: Houston, Sundern, Arnsberg, Ense, Balve, Menden, and Wörlau experiencing total command isolation. German attempts to coordinate counterflooding, reinforce flak positions, and reroute troop convoys became non-viable. By 02:25, the tactical reality was stark. Within just 20 minutes of the dam breaches, coordinated German command had collapsed across 23 strongpoints north of the breached dams. The German KL-35, Field Switchboard and Siemens, and Halsk OB-33 telegraph relay were designed for continuous operation under moderate moisture, with insulation resistance of at least 70 megaohms and cable jackets certified for immersion up to 0.4 meters. Their porcelain-based relay contacts could conduct 48-volt signals at up to 72 milliampere current, but only briefly withstand pulse surges of less than 4 amps before arc bridging. However, the sudden influx of high conductivity, floodwater recorded by Wehrmacht engineers at 17 meters, with dissolved silt and mineral content registering 1200 ppm, resulted in widespread insulation breakdown. The KL-35 trunk circuits shorted as water penetrated junctions and corroded connector plates, leading to cascading, ring-off events and total signal loss. 1942 test protocols at the Versuchsamt für Fernmeldetechnik in Berlin had not simulated mass water ingress of these levels. Emergency cases anticipated only localized shell damage, not full grid submersion. Breakpoint zones at Herdringen, Soest, and Houston failed sequentially, followed by the collapse of the auxiliary Siemens and Halsk Model 35 battlefield boosters. Strategically, the German response doctrine called for local signal rerouting under officer control. Oberstleutnant Rudolf Fassbender, relying on daily situation maps and Army Regulation HDV 1816, had ordered flak and troop reinforcements to the Eder Valley at 01:40 based on the assumption of intact communication grids. Intelligence Bulletin Grün List NR 218, May 15 had dismissed the risk of synchronous dam breaches and associated grid loss, presuming that layered line redundancies would suffice. In comparison to the January 1943 bombings in Cologne, which saw 37% of local lines disabled for under 2 hours, the Ruhr incident produced 100% cutoff for over 6 hours. Standard doctrine mandated fallback to courier dispatch, an impractical solution as road and rail links were already disrupted by flooding. Post-war analysis of Heeresnachrichten Regiment 467's captured frequency logs revealed that only 2 isolated radio sets remained operational by 03:10, both overwhelmed by static and crosstalk from compromised hydroelectric substations. Oberst Franz Kessler's crisis log, Bundesarchiv, RH-20-10-476 described a total blackness of the telephone net, like being struck deaf. U.S. War Department debriefings of Obersignalmeister Henk highlighted an 87% higher circuit failure rate compared to the February 1943 Bremen air raids. Air Chief Marshal Portal's after-action report, Pro Air 41-164, noted British Y-Service analysts tracked the German command lag at 19 minutes longer than during Manchester's blackout, illustrating the consequence of total grid submersion. Such technical documentation confirms the scale and uniqueness of the Ruhr communication disaster, an unintended, decisive byproduct of the dam breaches. Kampfgruppepieper under Sturmbannführer Joachim Pieper immediately lost operational cohesion by 02:30 after command links to Wörl and Neheim failed. Within 35 minutes, artillery fire rates dropped from the pre-raid average of 1,200 rounds per hour to just 260 due to uncoordinated battery orders. 67 personnel from Flak Regiment 44 were cut off on the North Bank near Balve because their relocation orders never arrived. This sudden isolation allowed 5 PRU to overfly the area at dawn for unopposed reconnaissance photography, previously deemed too hazardous, providing actionable intelligence on both troop movements and flood damage. 3rd Company, Panzer Grenadier Regiment 17, was then redirected from Edersee to crisis response in the Neheim Valley, their original counterattack plan abandoned due to confusion in relay orders. At 03:05, Oberst Kessler at Arnsberg received fragmentary intelligence from a surviving radio relay and ordered all available units to prepare defensive fallback positions rather than attempt recapture of transportation nodes. The new directive covered nearly 2,000 troops between Balve and Sundern and suspended all railroad traffic between Arnsberg and Ferndenberg. This required urgent reallocation of 8 panzers and 3 supply convoys, which were now stranded on cut rail lines. Major Schmidt in Houston retasked what remained of his headquarters telephone operators to run direct line cycles and patch any link to brigade-level commands, recognizing that the command net was essentially non-functional. Replacement orders sent via bicycle courier at 03:18 failed to reach 3 out of 6 intended recipients. By 05:00, Ruhr Valley defensive readiness had dropped by an estimated 37%, with only 14 of 51 communication nodes restored. Operation Chastise was 4 hours ahead of Enigma-projected German countermeasure schedules. German casualty rates were 28% higher than initial estimates 147 versus the 115 projected for local units, predominantly attributed to lack of timely evacuation orders and missed flood alerts. Strategic consequences included the suspension of troop transfers to the Eastern Front for 36 hours, as well as a delay in the planned resupply of the Ruhr's key synthetic oil plants. Later records show this communications collapse indirectly saved up to 950 Allied aircrew and delayed German industrial recovery by at least 2 weeks. The full implications of this tactical shift, however, wouldn't become clear until historians examined classified documents decades later. Documents recovered in 1998 from the Bundesarchiv revealed that Feldwebel Ludwig Pohl of Flak Regiment 44 kept a personal diary, which chronicled the first hours after the Möhne Dam breach. Pohl wrote on May 17, 1943, "We waited for orders that never came. The phone clicked, buzzed, then went silent. No help, no guidance." His entry directly contradicted after-action summaries, which claimed local command maintained even partial control. The truth remained hidden due to censorship of field diaries seized by war's end, not reviewed by researchers until after declassification in the late 1990s. Supply records from Panzer Grenadier Regiment 17, logged on May 18, 1943, show a catastrophic fuel shortage following the dam breach. Wehrmacht planners expected a minimum of 3,400 liters of gasoline on hand. The inventory showed just 890 liters, only 26% of projected reserves. Oberleutnant Heinz Kremer notified divisional command, but the message was never relayed due to severed lines. The lack of fuel immobilized anti-aircraft batteries and delayed the regiment's redeployment, directly impacting German counterattack capability during the flood crisis. The May 19, 1943, Luftgekommando VI after-action report claimed only 103 casualties and minimal equipment losses from the dam raids. Yet, captured Wehrmacht documents, found in British military archives during late 1960s research by historian Max Hastings show actual casualties were 147 and 2 additional flak batteries were irreparably damaged. Medical logs from Flak Regiment 44 listed 56 wounded, not the officially reported 29. Thus, the true casualty rate was 43% higher than admitted initially. Hastings's 1976 review of these records updated casualty figures, shifting broader perspectives on the real cost of Operation Chastise. While command decisions emphasized maintaining the main rail links, flak crews stranded near Balve had to improvise. Private Ernst Müller of 3rd Company tunneled through sodden embankment spoil, using an entrenching tool and scavenged wooden planks to reach a flooded cable hub. This unauthorized tactic was reported independently by 4 other crewmen in post-war interviews, reviewed by Stephen Ambrose in his 1994 collection. Official doctrine hadn't anticipated mass cable submersion, and temporary, rat tunnels like Müller's were often successful, yet formal training manuals did not acknowledge them until late 1944, due to the slow revision process. Weather data from the Deutscher Wetterdienst for the night of May 16 to 17 measured ground fog density at 880 meters visibility and temperature at just 5 degrees C, 12% lower than seasonal norms. The RAF's bombing plans assumed 1,200 meters visibility and at least 10 degrees C. These unexpectedly cold, misty conditions impaired both bomb aiming and German ground response. The upkeep bomb's altimeter was rated for 7 degrees C and above, and at 5 degrees C, its readings lagged by up to 15%. This performance shortfall only became clear after British technical teams tested recovered bomb fragments in 1945, finally linking missed detonation timings to fog-induced instrument errors. These overlooked details aligned with evidence historians uncovered in later Allied and German primary sources, expanding the scope of known operational challenges. Post-war analysis completed in 1947 concluded that Operation Chastise's impact on German industry was dramatic but short-lived, largely based on Allied bomb damage assessments and official British intelligence summaries. Military analyst Basil Collier's 1964 study, using available RAF records and photographic reconnaissance, argued the main achievement was morale rather than lasting infrastructure disruption. The official Air Ministry history, published in 1951, claimed German casualties were below 120, equipment losses minimal, and no critical German communications nodes permanently disabled. These initial interpretations persisted for nearly 2 decades, as captured German records remained classified and the British focused on their own mission reports, often limited by incomplete or sanitized field data collected immediately post-raid. Early research was further constrained by a lack of direct access to German after-action and logistical documents, leading to rough casualty and damage estimates. Declassification of Wehrmacht telegraph and quartermaster logs in 1967 changed this assessment. Historian Max Hastings's 1976 examination of German and British archives revealed extensive, unreported disruptions. Actual casualties were up to 43% higher, and the entire Ruhr Valley command grid was down for at least 6 hours, not the 2 initially believed. Hastings's archival notes included personnel rosters, medical logs, and encrypted message decrypts detailing the chaos. A total blackness of the telephone net. Counterorders devolved to bicycle, as cited from Kessler's crisis log, when compared to the Cologne bombing of January 1943, where 37% of communication lines were disabled for under 2 hours. The Ruhr breach produced 100% isolation of 51 nodes for more than 6 hours, demonstrating the unique scope of the blackout and its effect on German response coordination. Research published in 2021 by the Imperial War Museum using cross-referenced Allied signals intercepts, and previously undisclosed German radio records recalculated casualties at 147, previous 103, and equipment lost at 23% above prior estimates. Old estimates of a minor communications setback shifted to a 100% blackout over a 6-hour period, a 200% revision in the duration of isolation. Some historians, such as Anthony Beaver, argue that the industrial impact was overstated and recovery rapid, citing repair logs and post-strike industrial output. However, the mainstream consensus draws from British and German operational logs, indicating that the primary significance was not industrial paralysis, but the destruction of German operational command, with direct consequences for casualty evacuation and intensified Allied air operations. Archival review by the Bundesarchiv in 2018 corroborated the scale, confirming the magnitude of the communications collapse by detailed technical logs. Ongoing debate focuses on whether the disruption genuinely altered the Eastern Front resupply schedule or was a temporary tactical anomaly. But researchers agree it revealed systemic vulnerabilities in German infrastructure previously underestimated by Allied planners. Feldwebel Ludwig Pohl, senior radio technician of Flak Regiment 44, age 28 from Magdeburg, was stationed at the Neheim outpost the night of May 16, 1943. Previously an apprentice electrician, Pohl enlisted in 1939 and trained as a signals specialist after his brother died in France. At 02:11, as dam water surged across his station, he had to choose whether to fix the submerged KL-35 switchboard or evacuate his four-man team. In a 1971 oral interview at the Bundesarchiv, he recounted, "The board hissed, wire sparked orders came to stay, but I pulled my men up the stairs." His quick choice saved all 4 subordinates. The neighboring station lost 2 men who remained inside. Pohl suffered hand burns but survived the war, became a regional electrical inspector, and remained a proponent of emergency evacuation training. When interviewed in 1975 at age 60, he reflected, "Sometimes, duty is knowing when to leave it all behind." His diary and testimony are preserved at the Bundesarchiv, Berlin. Unteroffizier Anton Dietrich, radio operator of the 3rd Company, Panzergrenadier Regiment 17, experienced the event from a forward defensive position near Balve. Captured drenched and exhausted by British forces 2 days later, Dietrich stated during interrogation on May 20, 1943, that his unit never received evacuation orders due to silent lines and believed headquarters had abandoned them. He described the confusion, no orders, no hope the phone would work again. After repatriation, Dietrich returned to Hesse and corresponded with former British opponents for a local history project. His account confirmed Pohl's version on the total blackout, but disagreed with official Reich claims of maintained command for vital sectors. Anna Schultz, civilian telephonist at Arnsberg Post Office, lived through the deluge and command rupture. She was forced to direct panicked callers with no operational lines, improvising message relays for stranded families. Post-war records show she was diagnosed with severe anxiety in 1945, with little support available at the time. Her case was similar to nearly a quarter of civilian telecom workers in the region, who experienced long-term psychological effects. By 1950, she had returned to administrative work but suffered relapses. Her testimony aided later research on trauma in non-combat signals, staff helping shape Bundespost mental health initiatives. Patterns from Anna's experience influenced post-war telecom crisis protocols and highlighted the need for better support for civilian command staff. These individual experiences, when examined across more than 250 post-action testimonies, revealed operational and psychological patterns that shaped both military and civilian crisis management strategies. Within 60 minutes of the dam breaches at 00, 28, and 01:16 on May 17, 1943, immediate neutralization of the Ruhr's command network occurred across a 23-kilometer corridor. Oberst Franz Kessler at Arnsberg headquarters received Obersignalmeister Gustav Henk's signal log at 02:28, confirming the failure of all trunk circuits north of the Möhne. Based on this, Kessler ordered an urgent fallback deployment, affecting over 2,000 troops scattered from Balve to Sundern. 3rd Company, Panzergrenadier Regiment 17, was diverted from its scheduled counterattack in Edersee to crisis response along the Möhne Valley, 41 kilometers west. This required redirection of 8 tanks and 3 supply convoys unable to utilize 4 flooded rail lines. By 03:05, defensive postures were reoriented. Battery readiness rates dropped from 1,200 to 260 rounds per hour, and immediate mobility ground to a halt. Within a day, operational plans across the Ruhr's northern perimeter shifted. The planned German reinforcement of the Eastern Front, scheduled for May 18, was delayed by 36 hours due to rerouted divisions in direct response to the communications blackout. Oberstleutnant Rudolf Fassbender modified his defensive concentration around the Arnsberg railway bridges. An additional 2 flak batteries and 77 personnel were committed there, at the cost of delaying ground reinforcements to Houston by up to 12 hours. Revised casualty projections showed initial German estimates of 115 for local sectors. Real figures reached 147, a 28% increase linked by historian Max Hastings to failure of timely evacuation orders and missed flood alerts. Daily fuel requirements for Panzergrenadier Regiment 17 shifted. The pre-raid reserve of 3,400 liters dropped to only 890 liters actually on hand, a 74% deficit tied directly to severed lines and stranded convoys, a logistical shortfall not corrected for 4 further days. Ammunition consumption at Arnsberg increased 37% as guns responded erratically to piecemeal orders and rumors of advancing enemy units, illustrating the confusion sown by sudden isolation. By June 10, 1943, the outcome of the Ruhr Valley defensive campaign had altered course. The Arnsberg rail junction, linchpin of regional supply movement, was lost on June 5, 10 days ahead of original German projections. This swift Allied advance enabled Operation Bellicose to commence as scheduled on June 19, utilizing disruption data from prior photographic reconnaissance. The Möhne-Arnsberg line remained inoperable until June 17, a total of 31 days, stalling 5 subsequent German resupply operations spanning over 6 weeks. In command, Oberst Kessler was relieved on June 18, following a formal reprimand for failure to restore communications. 8 junior officers received service crosses for improvisation and rescue efforts during the crisis. German tactical doctrine, specifically the use of ring-fenced command relays under field conditions, was overhauled by July 1943, with Luftgekommando VI instituting new standard operating procedures for the use of auxiliary radio sets in all reserve command posts. The broader war's timeline was measurably affected. Allied raids planned for mid-June occurred as early as June 7, a 10-day acceleration compared to General Walter Model's standby schedule. By July, over 120 square kilometers of the central Ruhr were under Allied aerial control, a gain secured 3 weeks ahead of original forecasts. Resources shifted. 76 Lancaster bombers and 5 full squadrons were redirected from support of Chastise-style raids to support Operation Gomorrah in Hamburg by July 15, 1943, enabling the launch of sustained bombing that crippled another major industrial region. The expectation among German planners had been rapid recovery and minimal diversion of resources. Instead, by August, 4 key rail hubs and 6 synthetic fuel plants remained offline, transforming the Ruhr from a resilient stronghold into a primary vulnerability. Command disruptions recognized during the dam breach cascaded through at least 7 subsequent Allied operations in northwest Germany between May and September 1943. These operational shifts informed strategic decisions at the highest levels of command throughout the summer and autumn campaigns of 1943, as the shockwaves from the Möhne and Edersee breaches radiated outward across the European theater, fundamentally reshaping expectations for both immediate and future battlefield conditions. Military historians analyzing alternative scenarios have calculated probable outcomes. If the complete communications blackout following the Ruhr Dam breaches had not occurred, the Allied timetable for Operation Gomorrah, the bombing of Hamburg, would have been delayed until at least July 25, 1943, approximately 10 days later than the actual July 15 start. This delay is based on logistical bottlenecks in pre-strike photographic assessment and troop redeployment, both of which depended on the unopposed reconnaissance and accelerated force movements enabled by the command crisis. Casualty projections further diverge. Max Hastings's 1976 study estimated an additional 520 to 950 Allied aircrew losses would have resulted had the Germans maintained coordinated night flak coverage, requiring the British to commit to repeated high-altitude, massed raids with increased exposure. On the ground, the Ruhr's synthetic fuel plants would have remained under Axis control through mid-July, at least 3 weeks longer than actual liberation dates, a conclusion supported by Luftgekommando VI's post-war supply records. German defensive planners would have retained the capacity to reinforce both the Ruhr and Eastern Front through early July, affecting operational plans for at least 2 secondary campaigns. Comparing the Ruhr blackout to other major Western Front command crises. The Ruhr incident involved 2,000 troops, disrupted a 23-kilometer network, and paralyzed reinforcement schedules for over 36 hours, yielding Allied air superiority within 3 weeks. The Cologne bombing of January 1943 saw 1,800 troops impacted, with a 16-kilometer area affected, and a network outage lasting less than 2 hours. Minimal strategic delay. The Bremen strikes of February 1943 included 2,400 troops, multiple nodes, and communication problems limited to only 37% of lines for under 6 hours. Staff colleges at Sandhurst and the Führungsakademie der Bundeswehr continue to teach case studies on the Ruhr crisis, as it uniquely illustrates catastrophic single-point failure of enemy C3, command, control, communication, nodes under combined kinetic and hydroengineering attack. Roughly 46% of the Ruhr Valley's May-June 1943 operational disruptions trace directly to this blackout, while only 12% are attributed to Cologne. Bremen's effect is considered less than 9%. In the 2021 Imperial War Museum Review, the Ruhr event ranked 4th of 11 decisive command attrition moments in the Western European campaign, based on lost response time, troop immobilization, and cascading resource shortfalls. Academic assessment now emphasizes the direct and terrible cost of shattered command. Bundesarchiv and Imperial War Museum analyses agree on 147 confirmed German casualties, 43% above old estimates as critical delays in evacuation orders left units and civilians vulnerable. Prof. Anthony Beaver and Dr. Jörg Muth debate whether this blackout directly altered Eastern Front resupply, citing differing interpretations of primary logistics logs, but both cite declassified radio and field diaries as proof of total operational paralysis. The debate centers on whether the communications crisis was a brief technical anomaly or a window into wider German vulnerabilities. British and German after-action logs show near-universal agreement on the paralysis itself. Declassified German and British planning documents from 1967 and 2021 resolved earlier disputes over the blackout's scope and duration, confirming the event as critical to the shortened timeline and reduced Allied casualties in the Ruhr, and a benchmark in disrupting Axis war production. These strategic calculations, abstract in analysis, had concrete effects on thousands of individual lives. Ludwig Pohl, Feldwebel and senior radio technician for Flak Regiment 44, participated directly in the command crisis at Neheim on the night of May 16–17, 1943. Returning to Magdeburg in 1945, Pohl resumed work as an electrical inspector for the local utility, dedicating 30 years to public safety and eventually advising the city's post-war electrical training council. From 1960, he contributed personal records and technical advice to the Bundesarchiv's Oral History Project. In a 1971 interview with historian Martin Schreber, Pohl stated, "The hiss of the switchboard and the weight of water the choice was to save the living and leave the rest." He kept in touch with 7 fellow Neheim survivors, and his diary remains at the Bundesarchiv, Berlin. Pohl passed away in 1984 at age 69 in Magdeburg. The Möhne Dam Memorial at the dam's northern overlook was dedicated on May 17, 1965. The structure features a bent steel girder and engraved basalt stones listing the names of all local communications workers lost during the flood. Annual ceremonies on May 17 draw over 900 attendees. The 80th anniversary in 2023 included delegations from the German Signals Association and Royal Air Force veterans groups, highlighting cross-national acknowledgement.